All right, we are recording, and I'll keep my eye on the participants and let people in. JJ, if you want to get started with, who are you and why should we listen to you?
Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I am Jonathan M. Jacobs, professional registered parliamentarian, recently retired, and from the National Association of Parliamentarians, and a certified professional parliamentarian from the American Institute of Parliamentarians. I have been holding off on retirement there because I'm doing this thing. I was supposed to be finished up this year, but as you can see, certain things have come up where I'm a little bit more occupied. There aren't that many of us. I know with dual certifications, when I left, I believe the number dropped below 20 internationally, and even including people that are retired, it's probably less than 40 at this point, maybe less than 50. So not too many of us around.
JJ, I'm going to cut you off real quick. I'm sorry. Guys, if you could just mute for now, and then like if you have questions or there's like Q&A, we can open the mics back up. Thank you. Sorry, JJ.
No problem. I will warn you, I tend to be obtuse, and the older that I'm getting, I've noticed that I tend to be even more obtuse. So my apologies in advance. You can kind of guide me back to the, if I become too obtuse, you can kind of guide me back to the subject. I love going off on long stories anymore. It has to be something that deals with old age. But this is meant to be an overview. It is tailored for what's going to be happening in Reno, but it's not going to include all of the details. That's some of the things that we're going to be sitting down working out with the actual motions coming out and crafting them as needed. I am hoping that for Reno, you will have people here that are effectively floor leaders. They will be the people making the motions that I've rehearsed on certain things. And they will have an audio hookup with me, and I will be whispering things into their ear while this entire meeting is going on. Okay, I do have a question and answer policy. If you have a question, ask it. That's my policy. I will ask you to limit the questions, though, to something that I am talking about at the particular time. There's a reason for that. I'm not trying to be incredibly authoritarian with it, but there's a legitimate teaching reason with that. If it's something that I've already talked about and it's kind of, you've been mulling it over in your mind, what I would like you to do is, but I've already finished that and I moved on to something else, write it down and ask me at the end. I will have enough time for questions and answers. All of the citations, and you should see them on your hand, you should see them on the handout. There's the little things in the parentheses after some of these things. They're all tied to the 12th edition of RONR. This is what the 12th edition of RONR looks like. You can get a copy of this. They also have a much slimmed down version that will not be going into some of the technical things I'm talking about today, but it's still pretty good to get you through a meeting, which is called Robert's Rules in Brief. Make sure that it is, in this case, the 3rd edition, I believe. I'm looking at it here. It's copyrighted 2020. And pardon?
No, it was just a hot mic. I got him.
Okay. Okay. I do not get a commission on these books, by the way. So you don't have to, I'm not hawking something that I'm trying to sell you all. But right now, and I don't know how quite to share the screen, but let's just see if I can.
So down at the very bottom of the screen, there should be something that says screen share.
Yeah. Well, how do I get what I want up? I see it. I see it.
Yeah. So you just pull up your PowerPoint like you were, using it any other time and hit screen share.
Okay. Okay. We got it. Can you all see it?
There we go.
Okay. Now, today we're down here to talk about the Mises Party takeover of the Mises Caucus takeover of the Libertarian Party. I know a number of you like using that language. You'll have to forgive me. I don't really think it's a good term. I much prefer this. The Mises Caucus parliamentary coup in the Libertarian Party. That is a little bit more about what we are talking about. And that's because I've come up with a definition for what constitutes a parliamentary coup. This is what it is. It is the imposition of the will of the coup plotters on the assembly by appropriate procedural means. That means that I'm not going to be advising you to break any rule. I may advise you to legitimately suspend a rule. I may advise you to change a rule, but I'm not going to advise you to break a rule. There's a number of reasons for that. Now, what are appropriate procedural means? The will of the majority. We're just talking about majority here. It's the will of the majority of the people in the room, and in some cases of a supermajority, like a majority of the entire membership. It also involves protecting the rights of the minority, especially a minority of greater than 1/3. Also, the rights of the individual member, the rights of absentees. And as I said before, it does not involve violating an in-force rule. Somebody else would like to be admitted. Steve Witt.
Don't worry about that. I'll take care of that.
Okay. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do tonight is to try to give you an explanation of how motions work in general, so that you'll have some idea and you will see some of the applications that you will be coming into this. I have no idea why I talk with my hands like this, but I do. And this is what the actual presentation is titled. Motions, what are they? How do you make them? And should you worry about them? My answer is yes, of course, you should worry about them. In this particular case, that's me. And a motion is basically a formal way of saying, hey, let's do this, whatever this is. When that happens, these are called main motions. Just flip forward here. Okay. Now, some types of motions are a formal way of saying, if we're going to do this, let's do it this way. These motions are formal proposals to do formal proposals of ways to do certain things. They're called secondary motions. This is the big divide. You will be dealing with a lot of secondary motions. But let's go with a main motion. Main motions authorize can authorize the organization to take some action. That action can include spending money or borrowing money, as the case may be. Yes, I do follow the LNC. Give orders to an employee. Express the opinion of an organization. Approve some action previously taken. Adopt a rule. Those are all things that a main motion will do. One type of a main motion is called, and I should have updated this, I didn't, is called a resolution. It is something that is written in a very specific form. It begins with resolved that, with the words after it, just like a regular motion. It may include a preamble, which is a whereas clause, stating the reasons for adopting the motion. You might see some of these things, especially at a convention, because they are formal. They are basically more formal expressions of an opinion. Now, Let me give you an example.
Oh, you're about to give us example. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay. Let me give you an example of a main. Let me give you an example of a main motion of a resolution. Resolved that Nick Sarwark was a great chairman of the Libertarian Party. Yeah, that was trying to get some laughs for that. Yes. You could put a clause above that that said, whereas he served as chairman where he served as chair for a number of years. Now, you might not agree with that, but that would be an example of a resolution that would be in order. Just wanted to give you basically an example, and you don't necessarily, as I said, you don't have to agree with it. Technically, when a motion is about something new, it is called an original main motion. If it is about something that is happened previously or is in the form of one of the secondary motions that we will be talking about in a bit, it is called an incidental main motion. There's only one difference in Robert. There is a motion out there called objection to the consideration of the question, which you will probably not be dealing with at the convention. It is very dramatic, but it generally will apply. It can only apply to original main motions. You're probably not going to see it applying at the convention. Even if it would be brought up, I don't think it will be. Now, there are some main motions that are not in order. A main motion that violates the charter, the Constitution, or the bylaws is not in order. A motion that is the same as one that was rejected earlier in the same, in this case, convention, is not in order. So basically, there are some exceptions to this, but it's almost a one-shot deal. You get it right the first time, and you don't have to deal with it again. There are some other ways that we'll talk about that. It is the same as a motion that was already adopted and is still in force. So, for example, your Declaration of Principles is still in force. You can't re-adopt the Declaration of Principles. Okay. It is a motion that has been temporarily but not finally disposed of. When that would be, it has been postponed to maybe a later session or later in the day. It is laid on the table. You've done something with it, but you've not finished deciding it one way or the other. You can't go back and make a fresh motion. Main motions, okay, cannot be outside of the scope of the purpose of the organization. So you could not make a main motion to, I'm trying to think of something that would be outside of your scope, to it's hard to think of something that would be outside of your scope, but I'm trying to think of something like that. Sending aid to Ukraine, that would be outside of your scope. It might be laudable, but you can't do that unless you first have a 2/3 vote to admit it. A motion that does not do anything. You can't actually have a motion that says, well, I move that we don't change our convention standing rules. That's out of order. You cannot make a motion that is, or you cannot make a main motion while another main motion is pending. I want to go back to number 6 because a lot of times that can be confusing. I want you to think about this. If you go into a room and the television is not turned on and you do not want to watch television, what do you have to do? Somebody give me an answer, please.
Nothing.
Good. I heard an echo on that too. Good. Okay, you're right. You don't have to do a thing. You don't have to adopt a motion to do nothing. You just move on. You don't have to deal anything. A motion will only change an existing circumstance. If you don't want the existing circumstances changed, don't do anything. Just move on. Okay. Now, this is how you make a motion, and you're going to be doing a lot of this at the convention. You stand and be recognized, or you go up to a microphone and you get up there to make a motion. And you say, when you do this, I move or I offer the motion. Don't do what one guy, one of my clients a long time ago actually did. And he was asking me about a motion, and he said, do I just get up and say, I motion this? And I said, no, you don't motion this. You move it. You move it. Then I said, if you want to be a congressman, you're going to have to learn this stuff. He ended up being in Congress and the chairman of the Transportation Committee, I believe. I won't tell you who it was. There have been a few of them. Okay. Another member seconds the motion. The member who seconds the motion just has to yell out, second. That's it. You don't have to be recognized. If there's something up there, please, that you want to see considered, please second it. That does not mean you support the motion. It just means that you want to hear it discussed. The chair, the presiding officer, then either states the question or rules it out of order. Don't worry, there is a plan in case the presiding officer just stands up there and does nothing. We're prepared for that. Okay. The motion, especially a main motion, may be debated. And that means you get to speak for or against the motion. If you've made the motion, you cannot speak against the motion. You don't have to speak, but you just don't speak on the motion. After debate ends or is exhausted, the chair puts the question, which means states it and puts it to a vote. You vote on it and the chair announces the results. Okay. Now, before we go to the next screen, I would like somebody to stand up and try to do this. Preferably somebody who is not a registered parliamentarian and who knows how to do it. Hopefully.
Boo.
At least not first. At least not first. Let somebody else try it.
I move that we advance to the next part of this presentation.
Okay. Okay. First of all, you have to get recognized. So you just say, okay.
Yeah, Nathan Cole from Maryland.
Good. Mr. Cole.
I move that we go to the next part of this presentation.
Second.
Second.
The motion is moved and seconded. Is there any debate on this?
Call the question.
You don't have to call the question yet. And you can't call the question like that. We'll get to it. Don't worry. But once there's no debate, are you ready for the vote? The chair puts the question on, shall we move to the next section of the presentation? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Say no. The ayes
No.
have it, the motion is adopted. Now, if you had a question about that, somebody just raised their hand. Is that a question or a vote?
That was an aye.
Okay. Okay. We'll get to the point of what you do if you're not really sure what the result was. But in this particular case, the chair would just say the motion to move on was adopted. I would like somebody who is a registered parliamentarian to try this.
I was shit posting. I wasn't paying attention.
Good. I would like somebody to try to. I would like somebody who is a registered parliamentarian to try to make this motion.
What motion?
Whatever motion, whatever main motion you would like.
I don't have one. I'm sorry.
Well, try to think of one very quickly.
Maybe not that we use nay.
What?
Karen Ann, make a motion that you'd like to see passed in Reno, just for fun.
Please.
I'm really sick today and I'm not very creative.
Okay, well, can somebody else make a motion? I want to see somebody else make.
I motion to recognize.
All right,
Nay.
all right. Who is making? Who is
Sorry.
this?
Michael Heiss from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Heiss.
I move to have nay recognized as the official no vote on motions.
Second.
That motion is out of order, and
Second.
that motion is out of order. We will move on. Now, what did Mr. Heiss just do wrong? What did he just do incorrectly?
He didn't wait to be recognized.
No, he did something much more important.
already
He
operates.
didn't move to suspend the rules because that's a Roberts.
Not
thing.
even that.
No,
He
that's
was
something
saying he was
else.
Listen, this is what he did wrong. This is what he did wrong.
Hold on,
This is what he did wrong.
Order.
This is what he did.
He was trying to make a motion that had to do with the previous motion, so therefore it was out of order.
No, it wasn't. He did something else very basic, and I'm going to tell you what it was. He listened to me when I ruled it out of order and did not challenge my decision. It's necessary to challenge the chair's decision much of the time.
Can only the person who brings the motion challenge the decision?
No,
No.
I wanted to do that for an example, and I was hoping to use Karen Ann for that example, but I wasn't able to do it. I was going to try to
Well,
make you cry again.
I definitely would have appealed your ass. You know that.
You should have. You should have. I've been very critical of one thing that I have seen in the Mises Caucus. And I'm probably the only person on the planet who will say this about the Mises Caucus. You guys are not aggressive enough on the floor. You're going to have to learn this aggressiveness because it is important. Okay? Are there any questions about this? Does anybody else want to try to make a motion?
Question.
Mr. Thomas, Mr. Thomas.
Is
Your hands
the correct, is the correct terminology to challenge or to appeal?
The correct terminology will be to appeal the decision of the chair. We'll be discussing that motion specifically. We'll be discussing what to do if the chair won't listen to you. There is a method to deal with that. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Now,
But
is there another question out there? Okay.
This is Lori McCullough, Pennsylvania. The motion though that he just put on the table, isn't it against bylaws? And why would it stand?
It was not, it technically would have been a rule in the nature of a rule of order. It did not violate the bylaws. It was something that required you to change procedure, but it did not violate the bylaws. There are two different things. You can make rules that will change the procedure, as long as those rules themselves do not violate the bylaws. Did that answer your question?
It does.
Okay, we will be exploring that later. That's some of the more advanced stuff. Now, you don't have to do this every time a motion comes up, but I want you to notice the skull and crossbones. That means that this is something that this is a trap that you can fall into that is very dangerous. The chair can assume a motion. Oftentimes with approving the minutes, the chair is supposed to assume the motion that the minutes be approved. Sometimes if, for example, if somebody makes an amendment and nobody it looks like everybody kind of agrees with that amendment, the chair will just assume the motion. Okay, that is something that you can object to. That is not where you would need a point of order. that is something that when the chair assumes the motion, a member should stand up and say, I object to you assuming the motion, requiring somebody to make it and the chair to actually go through that process. There's also something called unanimous consent, which is when the chair looks down there and says, well, here's the motion that was just proposed. And if there's no objection, it'll be adopted. If you don't want that motion, object immediately, especially if the chair is also assuming the motion. If you don't want it, make sure that it's what you want. This is something, when that passes, it's usually too late to object to it after the fact. You have to make it, you have to act very, very promptly.
Do we have to be at a microphone in order to?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna.
Okay. No. The objection for these things can be yelled out. You do not have to be recognized. Yell them out, and if you have to, practice yelling them out. Okay? You have to be assertive.
Would you recommend that, and maybe we can get into this later, some of the chicanery we've seen, but would you recommend that we bring bullhorns just in case?
I would recommend that you have some sort of alternative sound system. Okay? After what I saw happen in Pennsylvania, I want you to have your own mics. But if you yell it loud enough, you'll be heard.
Pennsylvania specifically was what I was referring to because one of the delegates actually stole the microphones.
Yeah, weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I'm suggesting that you get your own microphones that can blast if necessary, and that you get one of these, a gavel. I will explain why after a little bit, but that you get one.
You do not recommend, though, bringing a skunk and letting it loose in the convention hall.
No. Bumblebee, a hive of bumblebees maybe, but.
Well, if it's a hive of
I just want to see that happen once before I die.
You're going to see a lot happen here, but I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of one-time things, except for me when it has not been a one-time thing. I will also tell you something else, and I'm going to be honest with this. Most parliamentarians do not do this kind of work, and most of them will not have seen the stuff that you're going to be seeing at this convention. It is usually a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I will have it happen to me 2 or 3 times in a lifetime, but it is rather rare. It is still completely in order, and it's in the book. And in some cases, I've actually written peer-reviewed articles about it, and I will see that you all get copies of it, or whoever is interested get copies of it, so that they can help understand this a little bit better. You can help understand this a little bit better.
JJ, can you just clarify what you mean by that? Like what you're going to see a few times in your lifetime?
Well, putting the motion from the floor, which is one of the things where the chair refuses to put a motion. You will rarely see that happen. Okay?
That actually was something I wanted to go into as well, because we're expecting, like what we saw in Pennsylvania, that the chair might not just filibuster, but be outright hostile to the body and try to, I don't know if the proper term is seize the convention. So yeah, if we can get into how to handle that.
That will be taken care of. I will be handling that under a point of order or appeal. But there is something else that you should know. It is very probable, and in my opinion, would be completely in order, if that to raise a point of order about the ability of your current chair to actually serve as chair. In my opinion, she was appointed in violation of the bylaws. I said it at the time. Their parliamentarian said it at the time, and I think that she can be removed without question and without the necessity of going through suspension of the rules.
That's something we really want to do.
Yes. We'll be talking about that with the specific motions. Okay, you're anticipating here. But I'll be going into that in detail. All right, there are several classes of secondary motions here. Subsidiary motions that change the wording, that basically deal with the pending motion. They apply to the motion itself. These are things like amending the motion, sending the motion to a committee, the amount of debate on the motion, laying the question on the table, laying the pending motion on the table. Then we have privileged motions, which deal with, or basically which relate to the assembly or to the members of the assembly as a member. Let me give you some examples. A motion to recess, that obviously deals with the assembly. You're going to break for a period of time and then come back. That deals with the assembly. Adjourning is another one. You're not going to be in session anymore. Okay, that deals with the assembly. Those are types of privileged motions. Then you have incidental motions that relate to a situation. These are the ones where you're going to see the most play, and you might see more play here than you will see in the remainder of your life. But these include things like a point of order, an appeal of the decision of the chair, suspension of the rules, parliamentary inquiry, division of the assembly. And then finally, and this will probably come up as well, you will have motions that bring a question back before an assembly. You have rules. Your rules can be amended. When you amend something that has previously been adopted, it has a specific name called amend something previously adopted. You will probably be doing that at this meeting. And both subsidiary motions and privileged motions have precedence. Let me explain what that is. Has anybody here never played solitaire? Anybody here? I've actually had clients who never played solitaire. They were Zulus. Don't get me started on that story. I'll regale you with it at some other point. But I did have clients. Okay, pardon?
I've never played.
You've never played solitaire. Okay.
Never.
Well, in solitaire, the key is to put a black card on a red card in order. So if you have a black 10, you have to play a red 9 on top of it. Precedent of motions sort of works the same way. Okay? You have at the bottom your main motion, and you can play certain motions on top of that. Both subsidiary and privileged motions have this precedence. We'll be talking about them in the order of precedence. Okay? You generally cannot make another motion of equal or lower precedence while a particular motion is pending. So you cannot make two main motions at the same time. You cannot make two motions to end debate at the same time. You cannot make two motions to recess at the same time. You can amend some of those motions, but you can't make two different motions. Okay? That's what precedence is. But the best way that I can describe it is it's like a game of solitaire. So if you haven't played solitaire, you're at a little bit of a disadvantage. But it's just how you rank those motions and which one you have to play, as it were, currently. Ms. Harlos, do I detect a smile?
Oh, no, I'm always just grinning for no reason.
Okay.
It's something, a story I told in chat that's just making me smile, that's all.
Okay, I do that all the time too, so, okay. And here's where I am talking about it again. I should have put this screen up, but this is what precedence is. You, again, a motion with a higher precedent, for example, of all the incidental motion, of all the subsidiary motions, the motion to lay on the table has the highest precedence. So whatever comes below that, maybe a main motion with an amendment pending to the main motion, with a motion to send that whole thing to a committee, you could play, you could set everything on the table by use of a motion to lay on the table. Here are the main motions from the lowest precedence to the highest precedence. The bottom is the main motion. The ones that are bolded are the ones you're probably going to be dealing with. You probably will not need to deal with postpone indefinitely. It's very similar to a main motion. But you really probably are not going to need to deal with it. The other motions here are amend, commit. Let me turn this back. There we go. Amend, commit, which means to send it to a committee. Postpone it to a certain time. Extend or limit the limits of debate. A motion which you've talked about called the previous question, which I don't think anybody has gotten right so far tonight. And Ms. Harlos has not tried. I know she knows how to do it. The motion to lay on the table, and we're going to talk about a motion to take from the table as well. But I wanted to ask you one question before moving into these. Does anybody know under Robert how long debate is on a main question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
10 minutes, up to 10 minutes, 2 times each person.
Yes. So if you are making, and if you are speaking on a main motion under Robert, and you have 1,050 people, they would get 2,100. They would get 2,100 10-minute periods to speak on that motion. Anybody see that as a problem?
Yes.
Good. There's a way around it. Now, we'll get to how we can get around it. Now, let's move down to our first. Let's see if I can find it here. Where is that? Here we go. Here we go. I'm going to move that down to amend. Amend can change the wording of an existing motion. It has to be related to the existing motion. Okay, remember when I said it, I wanted you to talk. If you have a question, you have to ask about what it is while I'm talking about it. This is the reason why. Because it teaches a lesson dealing with amend. It has to be related to what you are talking about. Debate in general has to be related to what you are talking about. It changes the wording of a motion or of something being reported before the assembly, such as your delegate list. A good example of an amendment for that would be to strike out some delegation and insert another or list of other delegates for that particular state. I can almost guarantee you that you're going to be seeing this happen. You basically just say, I move, if you're doing it, if you want to change the wording of a motion, you would just say, I move to amend the motion by striking out these words, or by inserting these words, or by striking out these words and inserting these words, which I think is Ms. Harlos's favorite.
No substitution.
Okay, or you can substitute it, which is to completely take out a main motion. Karen and I know each other, so we've known each other for a while, so that's why I'm picking on her tonight. Plus, I like nagging her, so that's the other
He's
thing.
the king of the negs. He nags me constantly.
Out of history together.
Yes. But basically, there are several different forms that we will go into as applicable. You can make them up on the fly as they go, or just to tell you how they work on the fly. They all have very different rules. They're all very complicated. But generally, that's used to change the wording of something in a motion. Now, it is usually debatable. When dealing with a main motion, it is always debatable. It is amendable, believe it or not. And it requires a majority vote. Now, notice I said it's amendable. Does anybody have any idea on the limits of debate on this type of an amendment? Anybody want to take a guess? Come on, somebody out there guess.
10 minutes.
I'm
Pardon?
not sure what you're
Dylan,
asking.
Dylan.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
15.
What do you think?
Sorry, 15 minutes is my guess.
Okay. No? Anybody else want to try?
2 minutes.
No?
10.
Closer. I'll cut it. I'll
9.
stop it now. Everybody gets to speak. No, everybody gets to speak twice for 10 minutes each. So you could speak twice for 10 minutes each on each main motion and twice for 10 minutes each on each amendment. Now, amendments are also amendable, which means you can change the wording of a proposed amendment. It has to be related specifically to that amendment. It can't be related to something else in the motion. It has to be limited to that amendment. And just like an amendment, a primary amendment, this is called a secondary amendment or an amendment of the second degree. But just like a primary amendment or an amendment of the first degree, it is debatable. Does anybody have any idea of what the limits of debate are on this?
10 minutes.
Anybody want to try
2
it?
times per
Same.
person.
All right, who said that? Who was just speaking? The male.
Joey Gamache, Minnesota.
Thank you. Okay, you're right. Exact same thing. Anybody seeing a problem here? Good.
Go on indefinitely.
Yes. Well, not indefinitely. You only have, if you only have one primary amendment and one secondary amendment, you'd only have like, 6,000 speeches of 10 minutes each. That's not indefinitely, but it could be a little bit of a problem.
You can call the question though at some point, right? And disrupt that?
Yes. Yes, you can. Okay. Next, you have commit, which means that you're going, not that you're going to commit to the motion, it means that you're going to send this motion to a committee. It may be just a committee of one person that you'll be appointing. Okay? It can be to a standing committee, like the platform committee or the bylaws committee. But it goes to a committee. You can amend it to decide, it has to be related, which committee you're going to send it to, or if you're going to appoint a committee, who is going to be on that committee. It requires a majority vote, and it is debatable to the extent of the desirability of sending the motion to a committee, whether it's desirable to send the motion to a committee or not. Anybody have any idea on the debate requirements on that? Somebody want to try it?
It's probably the same, right?
You got
10
it.
minutes.
Yes, you got it.
2 times.
Yeah, okay. Postpone to a certain time. This is one that at a convention, you're probably only going to see postponed during the convention, not to the next convention because there are time limits on it. But this just means that you're not going to deal with the motion now, but you're going to deal with it at a specific time later. Okay? And you set the time. And it's debatable, amendable, and requires usually a majority vote. Certain applications of it, when you give it special preference, will make it a 2/3 vote. But generally, it's a majority vote. And as you guessed it, the debate is everybody gets to speak twice for 10 minutes each. It's amendable as to what time you want to postpone it to. Everybody gets to speak on an amendment as to the time when it gets postponed. Okay. Now we're going to come to the next motion, which I think you're all going to see is a very good motion to know. Limit or extend the limits of debate. you can establish the limits of debate. You can do this by a special rule. And Ms. Harlos, are you still on there?
I am, and I just
Good.
scared the shit out of a bunch of people who looked up suddenly.
Good. Tell me, is there, since you do know this as well as I do, if not better, this particular question, is there a debate rule limiting the amount of debate in?
There is for platform and bylaws.
Okay.
There's really specific rules on that, but not on anything else.
Okay.
At least I don't think so. I've looked at so many fucking bylaws these past few months, but I'm fairly certain it's just for
Okay.
platform and bylaws.
That was a violation of decorum, just so you know. So that was.
Hey, listen, I'm wearing my
Don't start,
decorum shirt.
Don't start. Yes. Okay. I know. Yes.
Mr. Jacobs.
Yes.
I need to go to my platform committee meeting. I did
Okay.
have, you said to leave questions with you, and I don't know whether you'll be covering this.
Or you
I'll
can
get
just okay. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
If you'll be covering it, I'll get the recording of this or at some future thing. And I know the caucus hasn't made any kind of strategy decision on this. But multiple people have brought up to me that not only with Whitney, there are people who, whether we want them to or not, are going to be trying to make a motion to make me convention secretary. So if people are going to be doing that anyway, and I know the caucus hasn't made any kind of decision on that, I'd like them to do it the right way. So I just would like to add that to your list of things to talk about at some point.
Okay. There are two ways to do it. We will handle that.
Right. Okay. I will
Okay.
see you all later. Thank you.
Okay. Take down the scary picture of Whitney, please. Okay. Okay. Now, getting back to limit and extend the limits of debate. This is not debatable. It is amendable, and it requires a 2/3 vote. But there is also an order on how this can be applied. It can be applied to, if there are a number of pending motions. Let's say that there is a main motion, an amendment, and an amendment pending. We'll just say those two. The main motion is, you can limit debate on just the amendment, or you can limit debate on the amendment and the main motion. You could not just limit debate, however, on the main motion and have unlimited debate, or not extend the limits to the amendment. They have to be done in that order. There's an example of the order. You have 3 motions pending: commit, amend, and the main motion. That would be the precedent. You'd have to deal with commit first, then amend, then you'd go to the main motion. You could apply limits of debate to commit and amend, and then to the whole thing: commit, amend, and the main motion. But you could not just apply it at that point to the main motion. When you voted on the other two, you could decide to make limits of debate again and apply it to the main motion. But you could not do that just with one motion. And here's a rather unusual question. Previous question, which has nothing to do with the previous question. This is the one you've all been yelling because you want these things cut. First of all, when you do that, it's out of order. It's a regular motion. You have to be recognized, just like any other motion. It has to be seconded. And it requires normally a 2/3 vote. Let's say that there are the same 3 motions pending again: commit, amend, and the main motion. You could make a motion on the previous question for all 3 motions, or for just commit and amend, or for just commit. It would not be everything. You would have to do it in order. It's not amendable. You would make separate motions, and the one that would be the most inclusive, I believe, would be the one that would be which would be the first one. In other words, the one that included everything would be the one you would vote on first. The one that didn't include everything, that just included 2, would be the one that you'd vote on second. The one that only included 1, commit, you would vote on third if the other 2 are defeated. If the other 2 aren't defeated, you've already taken a vote on that, so you don't have to worry about it. But this requires a 2/3 vote. You have to be recognized. You cannot yell out the previous question. The chair would be perfectly correct in ignoring you if you yelled out the previous question. I've had a number of groups where people love to do this, especially if they are housing groups or condo associations. And when I am chairing or when I'm being the parliamentarian, especially when I'm chairing, I will just stand up and say, the chair will note that the members must be recognized to make a motion. And that shuts everything down, and a number of them have gotten used to it. So that is one thing to consider. Now,
May I be recognized to ask a question?
please, and you don't have, just ask it. Yes, just, you don't have to. For you don't have to.
When is it appropriate to present the motion to limit the debate? At any time after the debate has started, before, in between, anytime?
The person who makes the motion gets the first crack at speaking. It would be perfectly in order for the person to move to limit debate or to call the previous question immediately upon recognition. It would also be okay that if you've been talking about this for a half an hour, to move to limit debate. Debate can be limited to just, I should tell you with debate, since we've kind of gone on to that, I can give you a little bit of some extra instruction on that. A motion to limit debate can be, that we limit debate to one speech of 5 minutes, or to 2 speeches of 3 minutes, or that we end debate on this issue at 10 a.m. You have a great deal of flexibility with that. That motion is amendable, and you can actually introduce all of those as amendments at various points. But it's not at any specific time. Now, what were you going to say?
Can it only be made by the person who actually proposed the?
Any member can make this motion. For any motion except for one I'm going to talk about at the very end, any member can make a motion if it is in order at that time. That includes any member of the Mises Caucus and any member who is violently opposed to the Mises Caucus. Okay, there's a thing about, it's basically equal rights on that. I'm not going to advise you to try to step on their rights during the upcoming convention for a number of reasons. But one of them is it's the right thing to do, at least in my opinion. Another thing is you can get in big trouble if you try to do it. I'll explain what the big trouble is. Okay. Any other questions on what we've covered so far?
Yes, sir.
Please. Don't call me sir. JJ is fine.
Okay. JJ, I heard you say many times a member. Is any member allowed to make a motion, or do you have to be a delegate?
A member is a delegate in this case. They are used synonymously.
Okay.
Only delegates are members, not party members, but members of the body that is meeting. The only members that are of the body that is meeting are delegates. I am not a delegate. I will not be there. I am not a member.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. But no, that was a good question, by the way. Any additional questions? Okay. We're going to come to our last subsidiary motion, lay on the table. Now, this basically says, when you move it, I want to stop talking about this question and move on to another question, but we're going to at some point probably come back to this question. Okay? It is not debatable because it cuts off debate immediately. It requires only a majority vote. It is not supposed to be used to kill a question, and it could be ruled out of order for that purpose. Somebody ask a question.
No, I think it was a hot mic.
Okay, okay. We've talked about a little bit, mentioned agendas and things like that. Here is a use for this motion that is in order. You have something that the other side has put about 10 or 15 items of business before. It is perfectly in order when those items of business become pending, to move to lay them on the table and to have that adopted so that you can get up to the point where you want to get to deal with a particular question. Okay, so if there are 10 motions in a row, you just make the motion, you immediately get to speak on the motion. You stand up and you say, I move to lay the question on the table. Somebody seconds it. There is no debate on it. The chair puts the question, it is voted upon, and you move to the next question. This is kind of an easy way to get to move things up in an agenda if you don't get to adopt an agenda, or if you can't adopt an agenda. Do you follow that? You can just use this to put things aside and get to what you want. There is a time limit on this. You could not lay something on the table until the next convention. You could lay it on the table until the next day of the same convention, but not until the next convention a year later.
Is this any different from tabling something?
It's the correct way to say it. And a lot of times when somebody says table, they mean we want to kill this motion. This does not kill the motion.
Would it be, to kill the motion, that would be suspending it indefinitely, correct?
That would be postponing it indefinitely. Yes.
Postponing it, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Which is debatable, and it has a number of other motions that can be made while that is happening. Okay. This is not debatable. So this is a good way. If you have to go through things, you have to get to something, and the anti-Mises people are trying to stop you from it. You're in the majority. You don't even need a 2/3 vote for this. This is a way to get to it. So you might see somebody standing up at the convention saying, I move to lay this question on the table, then making the next motion, standing up and saying the same thing again and again and again. Don't be confused. Okay? This is a legitimate way to do this. There's a companion motion, which is called a motion that brings the question back from the table, or called take from the table. It is a motion, it's a bring back motion, a motion that brings the question back before the assembly. I call it a door key motion because once you lay something on the table, you can go back and take it from the table. Requires a majority vote. It's not amendable. Nothing can be pending when that's on there. You know, when you want to take something from the table. There can't be another question out there. It just has to be something else, you know, has to be a spot between when you're not dealing with any other main motions. But you can bring anything that you laid on the table back. So if you're going to use this to try to kill a motion, this is not a good way to do it.
So is there like a time period in which this is for? So I know you said it could be to the next day. You know, if this is something that starts on Friday, we could lay it on the table until Sunday.
Yes.
And we don't have to specify how long we're laying it on the table for.
No.
Okay.
I would encourage you not to try to use this to kill a motion. I don't believe you could stop it. I would encourage you to make this motion in good faith and not do this as a deliberate attempt to close the motion or to defeat a motion without debate. If it comes down to that, there are some other questions that we can talk about that I will help you frame. But I'm not going to encourage, this is one of those things where, yeah, you're technically violating the rules if you try to use that, if you try to use this motion in that way. And I don't want to encourage you to violate the rules.
Question,
yeah,
JJ?
I just want to make sure we didn't have to specify like a time period in which we're doing
Yes.
it for.
Was there, Michael?
Yeah, I had kind of a side question. There's a bunch of people in the
Sure.
chat. We can talk the details outside of this setting, but a lot of people thinking they might learn application of this better if we kind of do like a mock convention or like just a mock meeting. Is that something that you think we could do?
We can do it. I would be more than happy to help you with it. I actually want to drill you on some of these things, especially putting the motion from the floor. I want you to understand how to do this. So in case for some reason, well, let me put it this way, in case I'm hit by a bus on the day before the convention, you guys can do it without me.
Yeah, that would suck.
Yeah, well, hopefully not, but just, I want you to be able to do this. I want you to be able to understand how to do this. So I'm trying to give you an overview, and I'm trying to give you something here where you can actually look it up and understand how these motions work. I'm hoping to be able to give participants some material that I've written on it, generally with earlier editions, but that still works, about some of the things that I've talked about, to give you guys some examples. Would that work for everybody?
Worked for me.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next class of motions called privileged motions. You probably have heard the first one. I don't talk about it a great deal. It's called call the orders of the day. That basically means when you have adopted a schedule. Notice I used the word adopted. You establish, you say, we're going to do something at a specific time, and you've reached that time and nobody's calling it. You can make this motion, stand up and even interrupting something and saying, I call the orders of the day. You have to be recognized, but you can interrupt somebody else speaking when it becomes that time. You can also set aside the orders of the day by a 2/3 vote, kind of like suspending the rules. Notice that I said adopted. Neither the chair nor the convention committee, nor the LNC, nor me, nor anybody else can impose an agenda upon the convention. The convention can, any agenda would have to be adopted, especially if it includes a time frame. Okay, so that's going to be one thing to watch very carefully on that. Chairs, especially authoritarian chairs, like to do that. This is something where somebody would stand up and say, well, if there's no objection, we'll just use this agenda. Guess what? You just have a motion that was adopted by unanimous consent if nobody objected. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay.
How far in advance do they have to like provide an agenda for you to review before they take a vote on it? Do they have to provide it in advance?
No, nor do you. You can make a proposal as well. Actually, kind of hope, and I think that might be part of the strategy, that you make a proposal.
We are working. We are working on a substitute agenda.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that would be something that would be very good. You can make that. You can treat it as an amendment if they propose an agenda, or which they probably will. We'll substitute our agenda for this agenda. Or if they don't propose an agenda, you can propose your own agenda. Nice thing about parliamentary procedure.
They do have one proposed on the website.
Okay. Well, you can substitute your own. And remember, even if you adopt it, guess what? When an item comes up on the agenda, you can lay it on the table. Okay? Is that Mr. Doman, is that a smile that I see?
Yeah.
Good.
It's
Good.
fascinating.
Good. Okay. Next privilege question is called a question of privilege. This deals with something related to the existence of the assembly as an assembly, the convention as a convention, or relating to the members as members of the assembly. One example would be the air conditioning in the room. It's turned up too much. The room's freezing. You want them to turn off the air conditioning. You could raise a question of privilege that it is too cold in there and that the air conditioning should be turned off. And if that is entertained, and it should be, it would require a majority vote and it would be treated just like a main motion. This can also interrupt, if important enough, somebody speaking. It can be other things like going into an executive session. You probably will not be doing that. Who knows with this convention, you might. But for things like that, that's a good example. A question of privilege would be if somebody who was a permanent officer suddenly got sick and had to be taken out of the meeting, and you needed to replace that person. A question of privilege would be to elect the replacement on a temporary basis. Okay, this is not suspending the rules. There's another, we'll get into something else with that as well, but that would be an example of it. It could be something that deals with basically the safety or security of the assembly. You've understood that there is a fire in the building someplace and you need to inform all of the members and to prepare to evacuate. You've heard that a number of the rooms are being broken into by the police. That would be a question of privilege, informing the people, the delegates that are there, that their rooms are being searched by the police. That would be a good example of a legitimate question of privilege. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would still be a question of privilege. A motion growing out of it would be amendable, debatable, and require a majority vote. That would like being a motion to go into executive session or a motion to turn down the air conditioning. Okay, any questions on those two things yet? And ask them, please. Here are the remaining three. Is there a question?
Just what are some limits on what kinds of things could be those kind of privileged?
They have to relate to the assembly as an assembly or to the member as a member.
Okay.
If somebody would be, well, let me give you an example. Now, this is a very good example. This is a very legitimate example. If Mr. Sarwark would want to address the rumors that he is a spy. I've heard them, yes. Okay, I'm not a member, but I'm familiar with the jokes here. If somebody wanted to address if he wanted to address the rumors that he is a spy and to deny them, he could raise a question of privilege with nothing else pending and do that. That would be legitimate. Okay. If Chairman Heiss wanted to raise a question of privilege to state that he does not actually consume human souls, yeah, like I said, I've been paying attention to the humor. He could do that as a question of privilege when nothing else is pending. That to me would not be sufficient to interrupt somebody's debate. But if there was nothing else pending, he could. So does that answer your question, kind of?
I think so.
Okay. If you have any more, ask them. The next item is recess. This is a temporary break in the meeting, generally not overnight. There's really no great line of how long a recess is or isn't. It can be very short, 5 or 10 minutes. You might decide that you need to take a recess to discuss strategy. You can use this. You can say, I moved to recess for 10 minutes. It's not debatable, requires a majority vote, and it is amendable. We need to recess for lunch. That's another example for it. You need a restroom break. Believe me, a lot of times, depending on the organization, determining who wins depends on the ability of their bladder to work. I am not joking when I said this. One of the reasons I am retiring is because I'm getting older. When I was younger, that was a good way to win a lot of cases. I learned that very early, that you don't go out of the room for a restroom break, you take a restroom break. Okay, probably too much information, but it is true. This is what you use it for. But this is just a temporary break in the meeting for a fixed period of time. Adjourn is generally to either adjourn until the next day or for a longer period of time. There's no great bright line on this, on whether it should be recess or adjourn. But it's generally to the next day or to adjourn without day. I believe it's pronounced sine die. My Latin is not particularly good, I'm sorry. But that will end the convention. Okay, you do not want the chair to declare the meeting adjourned. That is a time which she could do using unanimous consent and an assumed motion. You don't want her to do that. That's the kind of time when you want to stand up and object. Now, fixed time to adjourn is what I call a door key motion, much like take from the table. Because if you close something out, it'll let you back in. This basically says, this is a motion that says, okay, when we adjourn, we will adjourn until a specific time. And then we will come back in session, maybe at a different place. You're going to use this motion. Did somebody have a question? Okay. This is the motion you will use if everything goes south and they try to close out the meeting and you have to move the location because they've called security or something like that. It will be to establish a different time and a different place for the meeting to continue. We're not going to let the anti-Mises people do that without the consent of the Mises people. They may try it. They're not going to get away with it. We are planning, at least I am planning, for the worst. This is probably the worst case scenario, and this will stop them. It requires a majority vote, and it is amendable. So it can be to adjourn to another city, another hotel, whatever, or to adjourn at the call of a committee of A, B, and C. And they will make the arrangements to do this. I don't think that this is going to happen, but if they try it, this will stop them. Don't think I haven't been taking this seriously and that I'm not worried about these threats. I am. We will note that, just to go back here, a question of privilege and call the orders of the day can interrupt somebody speaking. Recess, adjourn, and fixed time to adjourn cannot. So those lower two, you can interrupt. Generally, you can't. You would have to say, Madam President, or Mr. President, or excuse me, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, as the case may be. Madam Chairman, I rise for a question of privilege. But you can interrupt somebody for doing that, or when you do that. You cannot do that with these last three motions. I might even try to come up with a cheat sheet and saying, here are the things that you can interrupt somebody with. Okay, here are some common incidental motions. There are a lot of incidental motions. They don't have rank. These three are by far the most important. Point of order, an appeal, and suspension of the rules. An appeal is just to explain this briefly, is something that where you take an exception to the chair's decision. A point of order is a demand for the rules to be enforced. If you think that an error has been made, you raise a point of order. An appeal is an appeal of the decision of the chair when he or she when you disagree with her decision. It usually takes a majority vote and is sometimes debatable. Then we have suspension of the rules, which under Robert, and notice how I just phrased that, requires a 2/3 vote. That is not debatable. You cannot interrupt somebody when doing this. You have to make the appeal immediately after the point of order, so you're not really interrupting, but a point of order interrupts. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit more details.
JJ?
Yes.
Can you just let everybody know exactly what a point of order is?
Sure. Point of order is basically a demand that the chair rules on a particular point. You think that there is a violation of the rules, you are raising this point and saying, correct this action. Has to be something that is, generally it has to be something that is current. There is a very important exception. We'll get to that in a few seconds. That is what a point of order is. Point of order, the motion is not in order because it approves something that was already done. That would be an example of a point of order. I have a bad back and I generally am sinking down, so my apologies. But that would be an example of a point of order. Point of order, the motion, you've just made a motion to send something to a committee, and a motion to limit debates is pending. Motions are out, it's out of order because a motion to limit debate has higher precedence than a motion to commit. So you would just say, I make that motion, or I raise the point of order on that. Basically say that motion is out of order at this time. An appeal is when you disagree with the decision of the chair. Okay, generally the chair can be overridden by a majority vote, more than half of the people voting. Generally. It is sometimes debatable if the question that it came out of was actually debatable. And then we have suspend the rules, which is basically saying, okay, this is wrong. This is Mr. Rowland, I'll get to you in just a second. You're saying to the chair, you said to the chair, this is wrong. The chair said, no, it isn't. Or excuse me, the chair's, you think it was something was wrong. The chair agrees, but somebody else decides that you want to do this anyhow. Generally, you can suspend that rule. Mr. Rowland, what is your question?
Thank you. You've mentioned the majority or 2/3. Is that of the people that participate in a vote, or is it of the whole body, the whole number of people, quorum or whatever you want to call it?
Generally, it is the number of people that are actually voting. If one person votes yes on a motion to suspend the rules, nobody votes no, and everybody else abstains, you have suspended the rules. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Is it Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Okay.
So, just so you would wait for the chair to finish speaking their decision, and then you would say, I move to appeal this decision?
I appeal the decision of the chair. It generally requires, it would require a second. I don't think a second is going to be a problem. And hopefully if there is an appeal and somebody makes the appeal, I'm on there whispering into somebody's ear, I'm going to be saying, second the motion, second the motion, second the motion. Okay. Okay, all of the point of order does not need, you don't take a vote on it. It does not need a second. An appeal does require a second, and you do vote on it. Suspend the rules is generally a 2/3 vote. I have something planned that may just lower that because I'm very sneaky. Avery?
Hey, JJ, does that require recognition?
The chair is required to respond, but to make a point of order, you just stand up and you can interrupt somebody and say, point of order. The chair
You just
is
say, point of order, I appeal the decision.
No. For an appeal, you would have to be, you can immediately appeal after the decision on a point of order if you don't agree with the decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You have to do it immediately. Now and I'm going to tell you why you have to do this immediately with the next screen. Okay. Most rules can be suspended. But
JJ, one more of those general questions. When you say rules, like some people might take that to mean the bylaws. So like when you say the rules,
it generally means the rules in Robert, the adopted rules, or any procedural rules in your bylaws. Some rules in your bylaws cannot be suspended.
But not the bylaws themselves.
Some rules in the bylaws could be suspended. That is permissible. I think I just shocked a few people here. Yeah, if a rule is considered to be in the nature of a rule of order, and I'll get into that in detail. In fact, actually, your parliamentarian and I are trying to write a paper on it. But if a rule is in the nature of a rule of order, that it's in the bylaws, it can be suspended. There is a question about, is a particular rule in the nature of a rule of order or not? And there are some other things where rules cannot be suspended and where if you break them, you run into a problem. These are the list of the rules. Notice I said a rule that violates the bylaws, the charter, and there are exceptions. Let me give you an exception of a rule that you could suspend in your bylaws. I believe you have a rule that the chair presides at all meetings. Is that correct? Okay, that is a rule in the nature of a rule of order and can be suspended. You could simply say, I move to suspend the rules and permit whoever else to chair the meeting. Okay. A main motion that conflicts with a previously adopted main motion unless it was adopted by the vote needed to rescind. Any action in violation of an applicable procedural rule established in federal, state, or local law. Now notice what I said here. I said procedural rules. There is no rule in Robert that would prevent the convention from voting to stand a few people up against a firing squad or up against a wall, assembling a firing squad and shooting them. That does not violate a rule in Robert. If you ask me, even in court, if that is out of order, I will say no. It's probably illegal. I wouldn't advise you to do that, okay? It would probably violate the non-aggression clause, the non-aggression principle. But it does not violate a rule in Robert. It's very limited about what can actually come under that requirement. That is not considered a procedural rule of law. So there are some things in here that you can adopt that might turn out to be illegal. I'm not a lawyer. I don't claim to be a lawyer. And I'm not, I'm not going to attempt to practice law to say this is illegal and you can't, and you have to do it, or you can't do it this way or whatever. So I'm just telling you on that respect. This one actually, number 4 actually came up in an opinion I just wrote called A Fundamental Principle of Parliamentary Law. There are a few things in Roberts that they say you cannot violate unless you put it in your bylaws. One of them is absentee voting, and that deals with porcupine. Robert says that any kind of absentee voting has to be placed in the bylaws. It is a fundamental principle of parliamentary law that you have to be present to vote. So any voting system that would not do this would have to be authorized. You would have to authorize absentee voting in the bylaws, which your bylaws do not do. That's one of the reasons why I was jumping up and down and saying you need me to write an opinion on this and you need to get it out there. There are very few of those things out there, but you can tend to run afoul of some of them very easily. Another thing here, and if you're a libertarian, you should love this particular rule that can't be broken. You cannot take an action in violation of the basic right of an individual member, of absentee rights, or a rule in the bylaws that a ballot be taken. I said this last one may not be applicable to you because that would be a secret ballot. And I don't know if your convention can actually have secret ballots. A signed ballot is not a secret ballot. So if you break one of those 5 rules, you can't suspend, well, first of all, you can't suspend any rule that would come under those 5 rules. And if you break any of those rules, you will render the action null and void. Something else about a point of order. Generally, you have to make it when the violation of the rule occurs. So if, for example, the chair entertains a motion that didn't have a second, that needed a second, you've talked about it for a few minutes, you can't raise a point of order and say, oh, well, the motion wasn't second. It's too late. Almost all points of order fall into that category, except ones that would fall under these 5 categories. So these are the important things. You never want to be in a position where you're going to break any of these rules because it would render things null and void. Any questions on that? Okay. These are all suspension of the rules and a point of order are always connected in this manner. Next thing we're going to talk about is called division of the question. And this is where you will need it. If somebody tries to sell you a bill of goods where they're going to give you 10 or 15 different motions and saying you have to vote on them all, you either have to approve them all or you have to reject them all, you don't have to do this. If they're on different subjects, any one member can stand up. They don't even have to be recognized for this and say, I demand a separate vote on whatever motions on that list you want to have a separate vote on, even if it's all the motions on the list. Okay, so that's one that you're probably going to get. I would not be overly surprised if you would see the opposing force try to come up with a list and say it's all or nothing. Here, you tell them no. The next one is, you're going to get a paper from me on it. It's very old, but this deals with parliamentary inquiry and a request for information. You can, I should change that because it's now called it is a request for information now. They changed the name of it about 15 years ago. Parliamentary procedure is not always all the same. Some of these things date back to the 1890s, but some of these things are relatively new. A parliamentary inquiry is a question of the chair how to do something. It's just, Madam President, I want to kick you out. I want to kick you out as chair. How do I go about doing it? The chair has an obligation to answer that question.
JJ, I'm going to interrupt you real
Yes.
quick. I'm going to step off because I have to get up real early for a doctor's appointment. So I'm going to make you the host and I'm going to make somebody the co-host, but I just wanted to let you know.
Somebody who knows what they're doing, please.
Okay. But
I
yeah.
don't know that respect.
Well, you being the host when you leave, the whole
Okay.
meeting will end. So
okay.
When you're done, we're done. So I'm going
Okay.
to do that and then, all right, keep going. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Parliamentary, as I said, a request for information is asking a question of another member. Now, both questions have to relate to business that is pending at the time. You can ask another member a question. Another member can ask you a question. The other, they do it through the chair. They would simply say, Madam President, will Mr. Heiss answer a question for me? Or answer my question relating to whatever, and the chair will repeat it and direct it towards Mr. Heiss, and he can answer the question, or he can say, no, I'm not going to answer that question. Be careful if you are speaking in debate and it is time limited, because the question comes out from the time that it takes to ask and answer the question comes out of the time of the speaker. So somebody might decide to bombard you with questions. Parliamentary inquiry does not in that respect. Okay, we just talked about take from the table before. We're getting closer and closer to the end here. Now, this is going to be, and we only have these three out. And in fact, I think, yeah, these are basically the only three. We have amend something previously adopted. Now, this normally will take a majority vote with notice or a 2/3 vote or a majority of the entire membership. And it is fully amendable and fully debatable. Let me tell you something that you have already adopted. Your special rules. Or excuse me, they're called your standing rules in your case. They're attached to your bylaws. You have within your authority as members the ability to change those rules without notice, as long as you get a majority of the entire membership. One rule that I am going to suggest is to suspend the rules to or excuse me, is to adopt a special rule of order that says that you can adopt a motion to suspend the rules by a majority of the entire membership, taking away the 2/3 vote. Anybody want to ask me about that? Anybody there?
Yeah, why do you suggest that we do that?
Well, because you have a majority of the entire membership. And because basically you can change the rule with a majority of the entire membership. You're allowing yourself to be held hostage by a majority. Clearly something that is not a majority of the entire membership. And I'm suggesting that you create something where the majority of the entire membership will be able to act on the behalf of the organization. It's the basic principle that the majority rules. Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, my question is, how is that approved? That particular change you proposed? Is that chair approval or is that a vote?
No, that's a vote. That's up to you.
Okay.
The chair does not get that approval.
Okay.
Okay. The chair might decide to try to rule that motion out of order, and there is a process for putting the question from the floor. Well, first of all, if she rules it out of order, you appeal the decision of the chair. If she doesn't appeal, if she will not entertain the appeal, then there is a method for you standing up and putting the question from the floor. You're probably going to be seeing that at this convention. I would say there's about a 90% chance that you will. And I will give somebody there the idea of some of your floor leaders, a lesson on how to do it. When you see it, it will be very dramatic and it will appear that you are greatly insulting the chair. In my opinion, if the chair deliberately blocks a motion like that, he or she deserves that insult. I make no bones about it, because that person, that chair, is acting in contempt of the assembly. So that would be the one thing that I am going to suggest here. Ms. Harlos asked about a motion. It would be applicable to suspend the rules and permit the secretary and permit somebody else to serve as secretary. If a rule in there would be in place, this would be how you would do it. Likewise, you could suspend the rule using a majority of the entire membership to adopt or to have somebody else other than the chair serve as the chair for the meeting. This, I think, could be one of the biggest and most important things that you could be doing to get you through the convention. You will need to make sure that you have a majority of the entire membership first and that they are properly seated. So that's where you're going to get the first big fight. The second, or the last one that we'll be talking about is reconsider. Basically, this says that a decision that you made either that day of the convention or the preceding day of the convention can be reversed. You're looking at this and saying, we don't like our decision. We don't like the decision that we made. We want to change it. Now, this has to be made by somebody who voted on the prevailing side, the winning side, or the losing, whatever side won. If the motion was defeated, it was somebody who voted in favor of, or voted against the motion. If it was adopted, it was somebody who voted in favor of the motion. This is the only one out of all this list where how you voted actually relates to this. Dylan? I see your hand. Yes.
Yes. So say we're just, voting, like, raising our hands. How's that even verifiable?
We trust you.
You said it has to be in favor of it, right?
Yes, we are supposed to take your word for it. I am entirely serious.
That's okay. That's very shaky, but okay.
I will agree with you, but that is because you can do it. Let me put it this way. Even if this were a secret ballot, all that you would have to do is to stand up and say, I voted on the prevailing side. That is considered legitimate under Robert.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you wanted the answer. It might not be the one that you're thrilled about, but that's what the correct answer is. This is usually debatable and it requires a majority vote. Now, there is a specific use for this motion that I'm going to talk about. It's called clinching. Yes, Mr. Thomas.
So is there a counteraction if a person, like, can that be disproved, or is the good faith principle really good enough?
Only if it is on a roll call.
Okay.
But I want you to hear what I'm going to say next, because there is a tactical use for this motion. It can only be reconsidered once without suspending the rules. This once somebody makes this motion and you vote against reconsideration, it's a done deal. You can never get back to it in that convention. So if you just adopted a motion to do something that you wanted to do, you might actually decide to switch your vote against it, and then move to reconsider immediately. That way, preventing it from ever being hoping that reconsider is defeated, and that way you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the convention. Is that a little bit sneaky? Anybody want to say that that's sneaky?
Is the theory then that by reconsidering it immediately, that you then you take advantage of the momentum you currently have to get the thing passed? So it just passed, you reconsider, people say, heck with it, they vote affirmative again, and you're right back to now it's shut down. Is that the theory?
That's the theory. It's called clinching. A bit sneaky, perhaps, but it is within the rules.
It is possible backfire, but
it is, yeah, if people don't want to do it. That's why I'm trying to tell you about it. Now, somebody else can do it sneakily. Somebody else can wait until, you're all at a party or something like that, or you're all out at the restroom, or you've just come back from lunch, and somebody that doesn't like the motion, changed their vote, voted a different way, they can move to reconsider when there aren't as many people in the room, and maybe they get a majority. We're trying to prevent that.
Yeah, we should consider that every move like this is going to be attempted.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm talking to you about it. I'm going to admit Max Henry. Is he a member? Jake D and Max, should I admit them? Jake D and Max Henry. Is it okay if I admit them? Any objection?
No objection.
No objection.
Okay. And you're both admitted. Got to remember, I don't know you people. So that is basically what I have. I would like to open this up to all questions. And I expect to be bombarded with some, because I understand it is complicated and it is new to some of you. I will say this, it is going to be a very nasty convention. Richard Brown and I are friends, and before I was engaged here, we actually did talk about the convention. And he knows what to expect. And I said, look, from everything I'm hearing, they're going to be talking about putting motions on the floor and everything like that. And he kind of knows what to expect. Mr. Rowland.
Yes, thank you. If we've started a debate on a motion and someone wants to kind of silence discussion and rush to a quick vote, just moves to call the question, and let's say to get a quick second, is there any way to prevent that attempt to stop debate, or
vote it down?
If so, would that be the proper approach, is just to vote it down, or
vote it down? It needs a 2/3. Normally, it needs a 2/3 vote.
Okay.
Vote it down. Now, maybe you might want to actually change the rules and make that a majority. Miss Dordell, I think, were you asking me a question? Yes.
Yes, it seems like these two last ones are gonna be probably used anytime there's a close vote, you know, and you just want to try to get a second chance at it.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any, the reconsider, I see it's open to pretty much anything, but the rescind or amend, I see that at least in the reconsider, you have to have voted on the prevailing side. That's kind of the requirement. To rescind or amend, anybody, even the people that voted for it, like
Yes,
anybody who's angry from the other side can just
yes,
ask. So it's gonna be, it could be, and it can only be done once though, right?
it can only be done once, yes, during the session, and your entire convention is the session. If you were talking about monthly meetings, you can do this each month. But for this,
So-
it's, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
So strategically, I'm just thinking here out loud. Strategically, if you see a group of from the other side that just walked out after this big important vote, you know, and it came down to 1 or 2 votes, you could strategically just ask to amend something or rescind it.
Well, you could ask to rescind it. You could ask to reconsider would probably be better, because if you want to rescind it, you need probably either a 2/3 vote in this convention, because you couldn't give previous notice. That would have to be before the convention,
Oh,
or
okay.
a majority of the entire membership. So that would be
Oh,
a little
now
bit
I
harder.
understand. Previously adopted is not during the convention, like the day before. It's way before, or
Previously adopted would be something like your rules, like your standing rules.
special rules of order.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That
And
clarifies it.
something in the convention that they did adopt. If they adopted it, let's just say it was a regular motion. I don't know, you can, if you want to come up with a regular motion. That would generally require either a majority with previous notice, or a 2/3 vote, or a majority of the entire membership. One of those three. They can't give notice at the same time. They could give notice for the next day, but they could not give notice for that time. So that's going to make it either a 2/3 vote or a vote of the entire membership, a majority of the entire membership.
And just out of curiosity, how would you give notice?
You could actually stand up and give notice and say, Madam President or Madam Chair, I move to give notice to rescind the amendment, or to rescind the motion that we adopted today.
Oh, that's all it is? Okay.
That's all that it is.
And then the next day you bring up the issue after having given the notice?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. That clarifies.
Okay, Mr. Rob Nett.
Yeah, I would like you to go over again, just when you talked about the motion to removing the chair due to being unfit, and just kind of recap that one more time.
Okay. Okay, well, there are two things that we're talking about. One of the things here is that I'm suggesting is not to overrule, is not to suspend the rules and remove the chair. I think that that could be subject to a point of order. Under your bylaws, the person who becomes the chair when that vacancy occurs is the vice chair. He automatically becomes the chair. At the time, the parliamentarian, Mr. Brown, and myself both said, no, he is the chair. You cannot have an election for the chair. In my opinion, I'm going to let in Mr. Farrell. There's no objection?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. There is one? I've left him in. Okay. In my opinion, the vote to elect Ms. Bellew as the full-blown chair violated your bylaws. It did not violate a procedural rule of order in your bylaws. Let me flip back here. Okay. This was number one, a main motion that violated the bylaws or charter. Robert backs this up. Let me give you the actual citation in the current edition, just to show you that I have actually looked at this and that I'm not making it up. Okay, Let's see, nope, right up here. I will read it to you specifically. First of all, well, I just want to put this out here dealing with elections. And cumulative voting, no. Contesting the result, let's see. Yeah, it is section 4649 B. If there has been a previously valid election for the same term and a subsequent election, the subsequent election of another is the adoption of a main motion that conflicts with one still in force, which is number 2. So in my opinion, and again, this was the opinion of Mr. Brown, the parliamentarian, who's not working for the Mises Caucus, he said it at the time, was that her election was illegal. I am suggesting that somebody raise a point of order that her election is illegal and that if necessary, appeal the decision of the chair. And if that is the case, she will be removed and Mr. Mulman will be the president or the presiding officer. He will be the chair of the meeting. Another method for doing this would be to, which is also in order, would be to suspend the rules and elect whomever as chair for this convention. Either of those things could work. Under the rules as they now stand, that would take a 2/3 vote. I believe that it would be proper. I believe that that you should change that to a majority of the entire membership and then proceed to do it if you're going to use that method. If one method does not work, you can use the other method because they are two different subjects effectively. Would you like me to repeat that? Mr. What's your question?
I would like that repeated.
Oh, okay. Basically, you can. I am suggesting that you raise a point of order and appeal if necessary, that the election of Ms. Bellew as chair was improper, based on 4649, and that Mr. Mulman is the chair. That will take a majority vote. Or you can also take the route of suspending the rules and electing somebody else to serve as chair. It can be Mr. Mulman. It does not have to be Mr. Mulman. Even if Mr. Mulman is in the chair, you can still suspend the rules and agree to elect somebody else as chair. So these are independent of each other. They will both have the effect of removing Whitney Bellew. And I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I'm probably butchering it. But you can do either or both of those things. And I am suggesting that that is what you do. And I also, again, want to be clear that at the time, the parliamentarian who was not part of the Mises Caucus felt that it was improper to elect somebody as chair. That was actually the chair's initial ruling, though it was overturned by an LNC, by an appeal of his decision of the LNC. Is there another question? Yes, Mr. Mosley.
Yes, am I hearable?
Yes.
Okay, good. This is, I don't want to get into a bunch of, I just want a quick history.
Sure.
Mr. Jacobs, you said that yourself
JJ.
and Mr. Brown have, JJ and Mr. Brown have both offered the opinion to the NatCom that this was an illegal election for an appointment. So all the members of the NatCom know that. Is that true? They knew
That
in
is
advance?
correct. It goes a
your
little bit
opinion?
further. I did not write an opinion. I expressed that he had talked to me. And
It's like even you fell down a flight of stairs.
Connor.
Connor, mute yourself. Connor, sit down and mute yourself. Connor.
Connor, let me get this.
Connor.
The best way to recover is to
Just like the
you can
Riverside
mute him, I
Community
believe.
I'm trying to find out where he
Music,
is. See if I can mute him.
rock
Let's see.
music, so
Okay, I'll
why
mute
don't
him.
you put
Here
some
we
of
go.
that rock-
Got it. Got it. Okay, let me get back to this. Let me see. Mr. Mosley. This
Okay.
was the
I
written
really just-
opinion. This was the written opinion of Mr. Brown when the vacancy occurred. He had talked to me about it at the time, and we've known each other for years. And it's common for parliamentarians to talk to one another about these kind of situations. He knew I was following it. He was of the opinion that it was an illegal election. He then went on to Ms. Harlos's other after this occurred, to Ms. Harlos's particular show, The Call of RONR, and talked about it and also indicated that it was improper. So there is no question about that. At that time, the opinion of the LNC was that they appealed that decision. I'm going to stop sharing this if you'll just let me do this for if I can figure out how. Let's see. Stop share. Okay, there we go. Okay, that'll be a bit better. That'll work a bit better. Sorry about that. I'm not used to this system. But he actually went on there and talked about how it was improper to elect somebody at this point. That Mr. Molman would have been the chair. Now, Mr. Molman could have resigned after there was a vice president elected, and that vice chair was elected, and that vice chair could have gone forward. But that is not what happened.
Okay.
I
I just wanted a brief outline of.
I'll tell you what, if you will send me a message and my email is at the bottom of that, I will try to dig up a link to the tape, which I believe is online, and you can actually see the show that they did on the Call of RONR about it. I've been on the show as well, but not about that particular subject. It was more of a general thing. They wanted to interview an actual parliamentarian, which I was at the time, as opposed to retiring. Ms. Eisenhower?
Yeah, I was just gonna see if you could sit in the waiting room in, please.
Pardon?
Would you mind letting Tim in? He's in the waiting room.
I actually just got in.
I
Thank
let
you.
Tim in.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Mosley, did you have a follow-up? Do you have a follow-up, Mr. Mosley?
No, that's sufficient for now. Thank you.
Okay,
I'll be in touch.
Will you please send me an email and I will send you a copy of that. But that was, and I think his opinion might be online. I'm not certain, but he gave it at the time as well that was the correct thing. And Mr. Molman actually ruled that way and was overruled by the LNC. Now, I also am relatively sure he didn't want the job, but it's automatic and there was a particular problem with him. He went into it with a particular thing there, with Mr. Brown did why he did it. And I happen to say I concur with it. He's indicated that he's talked to a number of other parliamentarians who did. I know the few that I've talked to relating to this also agreed that it was an illegal election. Okay. Are there any other questions? Comments, threats? Yes,
This
Ms.
was awesome.
Ms.
I just want to say how awesome this was because we've gotten smacked around at conventions in 2020 and 2018, and stuff like this is absolutely instrumental for those of us who have been to conventions in the past. So this is totally awesome. I just want to thank you.
Well, that's not a problem. I've come out of it. I'm going to say this: I am not a libertarian. I probably would not be a member of the Mises Caucus if I were a libertarian. But what I've seen being done by the anti-Mises people has offended me as a parliamentarian. This has been particularly, I've seen some very egregious things that I don't like. And this is one of the reasons why I said, okay, I'm coming out of retirement for this. I hope I get an honorarium out of this. I can't even charge a fee. But that's been one of the reasons why I've been up here and why I'm doing this, because I'm just so appalled. Now, Ms. Genrich, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Hi,
Please speak.
JJ. This is Lynn Genrich from New
Genrich.
Jersey. My question is, and I recognize you're a very, very busy man. My question is, would you happen to have another evening before the next meeting to do this meeting again, just to help build my confidence? I've really taken a lot from this, but it always helps to relearn. And I know I'm asking a lot and I'm being very selfish, but if you have any available time, I would be open to that. Thank you.
Ma'am, I am retired. I have plenty of time. I will be happy to do that. I believe we have some other times scheduled. I think it would be a good idea to actually do rehearsing and to try some things, which doing some of the things that I was doing tonight with me up here yelling and screaming at you and trying to throw you off when you're trying to put a motion from the floor. And so that you will learn to ignore the person trying to do this. Erin Thompson?
Yes,
speak.
hi. And
Hi.
also just thank you. Really appreciate you. But yeah, my question is, trying to make sense of this is there's a lot of new information. What is there like a cheat sheet or a rule of thumb for what kinds of things need to be seconded and what kinds of things don't, and other things like that?
It's in the back of Robert. I can kind of do that. If you take a look at the handout, which you should have in your inbox, those things include the vote needed, whether it's amendable, whether it's debatable, and the vote needed. So I think on this list, the only thing that really doesn't need seconded are those two incidental motions, or excuse me, those two privileged motions. I'm doing this from memory, so it would be question of privilege and call the orders of the day do not need to be seconded, and a point of order. That's it on your list. You want to mark that down on that list. That's all that you would need for that. I think the rest of the information is on there.
But like as a rule of thumb sort of thing, like what's the rationale behind that? Like I just want to be able to understand why instead of just like, I don't know, just memorizing stuff. I feel
Sure.
like I'd get it wrong more if I just try to memorize things.
Sure. Well, to extent, if it's rather important and it deals with an individual's right, that tends to be that. And there was another motion that I forgot, division of the assembly. That also deals with an individual's right, because you have a right to vote on the motion separately. Those would be there are only about 4 of them. And if you shoot me an email, I will actually send you out an email, and you can send it around, because there are only 4 of them that I've talked about where you don't need a second. And they are, and they basically, they deal with the assembly staying on schedule, rights of the assembly, right to vote on something individual, and a right to demand that the rule be enforced. Those are the 4 that come down there. I don't know if there's a bigger pattern than that. Can I go to Mr. Thomas, excuse me.
Just wanted to pile on the expression of gratitude train.
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Thompson, did I answer your question sufficiently or close to sufficiently?
Close. It's just there's more to it. It's just sort of like not just like what kind of things need seconding and why. It's also is there a rationale behind some things needing majority votes and some things needing 2/3 votes and that sort of thing? Just like there's a lot of little rules like this, and I just wish that I understood it more intuitively.
Okay. Okay, well, for some things, like debate and the previous question, that effectively suspends the rules. And suspension of the rules requires a 2/3 vote. Majority, the one that's really out there is dealing with rescind or amend something previously adopted, because it has that 3 types of thing there. That's some of the basic rationale on this stuff, which is if it changes something previously adopted, or if it suspends a rule, which is effectively changing something that was previously adopted, at least for a short period of time. That is what, that's basically all that is needed. That's basically all that is needed, or that's why you need those particular strange vote totals. As a rule, everything is a majority vote, except where you get into those things. If you're going to talk about suspending a rule or undoing something that was previously done, that's where you're talking about different types of votes. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Are there any additional questions?
I have a question.
Please.
A lot of our states use Roberts, but not all of them. And so for those that are, using some other system that's out there, how difficult is it going to be for them to learn what they need to know to get through this convention? Not all the details, not all the, getting into the weeds, but what are I can't even think of like the name of the other ones, but what would be the main things that are different that they would need to focus on?
Francis, and I think the modern democratic rules is what it's called. They're not a particularly good book, in my opinion. I would suggest, if they really want to do this, is to get this book. It's the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order in brief. It has, with charts at the back, and this might actually help some of your other questions, with charts without charts in the back, without the index, it has 179 pages. You can read it in an evening. I'm not hawking it. I think it's less than $15. I'm not hawking it, but if you want to do that, you're concerned about it, that might be a good thing.
So for people, I have that book. I have the full one. I have the brief. I have a little one of those, what are they called? Laminated folder things that goes in a notebook. I have that stuff. But for people who aren't used to Roberts, what would kind of be their focus if they're used to one of those others?
I don't know what the others are, because I know that they're all things that are a little bit different. One of the things that I would tell you is that if you're talking about the standard code of the American Institute of Parliamentarians standard code of parliamentary procedure, it's a lot easier to change previously adopted things than you are in Robert. They have a different philosophy. And I think that only requires a majority vote in that book, but you're not using that book. But I would suggest Robert's Rules in brief. There's another question.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering what your affiliate code was. I know you're not hawking it, but
my affiliate code. I don't have one. Sorry. You mean for like do you mean for like Amazon or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have one. I'm retired. I'm retired. I'm not.
That don't mean you can't have a side hustle, JJ.
Yeah, well, I'm just, no, I don't have one at the present time. You can get a copy of this at a regular bookstore. You can get, these are pretty basic. It's, it's not that much of a problem. Even if you were to get an old copy, which you could probably get on eBay for half price, it'd still give you pretty much a leg up on somebody without it. I would suggest the current one. There are usually a few changes on things from edition to edition. They always drive me crazy because then I have to relearn everything. This is my third edition that I've actually, no, 1, 2, 3, my fourth edition, excuse me. I've been doing this for a while. But this is something that I don't, you can pick up just about any place. Are there any other questions? You've got at least a former, now retired parliamentarian here, so you might as well ask any questions that you'd like to. Okay, $8 on Amazon right now. Mr. Kaler.
Yeah. Are you actually going to be in Reno with us as like an advisor?
No, I am not. I am very badly disabled, and I know you can't tell it. I could always stand up, drop my pants, and you could see the scars on my lower back, but I don't think that's quite appropriate. I have a lower back condition. I've had surgery back there and everything. It's I'm not going to be there. It would be difficult for me physically to get there. It would also be more expensive for the Mises Caucus, and money does not grow on trees. I am hoping that we have a hookup where I will be talking to people while I'm watching the convention and while I am listening to things, and we will be able to I will be able to whisper things into their ear like, okay, now put the motion from the floor. Okay, now move to suspend the rules. Second the motion. I could not do that on the floor because I'm not a member. I'm not a delegate. I am not going to be there. I could not be there and do those things without the permission of the assembly, but I can do it remotely. Ms. Wood, do you have a question?
So are you going to be like a floor parliamentarian then? In essence?
I don't like to use the word floor parliamentarian.
Okay.
I prefer to use the word coup master.
Oh.
Okay. Yes. It's actually, in fact, that's actually, as it's been appeared in print, I actually wrote an article on how to do this a number of years ago. I've done a presentation at the National Association of Parliamentarians where I did that, where I've done this. And what I will be doing is, yes, I will be advising you on what the rules are and what I think you should do to accomplish your goals. I'm not going to be setting your goals for this. I've done this kind of thing for political parties. I've done this kind of thing in churches where I've not been a member of those things in the past, or where at that particular point, I was not a member of that particular organization. I did one in a church, and I won't go into my giant Zulu stories, but I actually did one in a church denomination where I helped change the leadership. This was about 20 years ago, 19 years ago, and it involved $50 to $75 million in assets. I basically whisper in their ear. I'm not a member of that church. I've been to precisely one service of that church after everything was over. And I said, I wanted to go because I've only been able to see you guys in meetings. I've never been able to see you guys as a church. One that I helped with informally was the removal of Trent Lott about 20 years ago in the US Senate. That actually came up over the Roberts Rules Association website. And it just came up on the just happened to work out that way, where I ended up advising the people that were trying to remove him as majority leader of the US Senate. That's the kind of things, those are the kind of things that I do. And that's just basically my background, and that's basically what I do when I'm doing it. But yeah, it is, people do call this being a floor parliamentarian. They call it being a faction parliamentarian. Some people call it being a combat parliamentarian. I'm not one of them.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Which?
The removal of what's his name there that you were just starting to talk about.
Oh, yeah, okay. That was quite simple. A guy, and I won't give you his name, but he was the chief of staff. He was the chief of staff to, I believe, well, yeah, I believe it was, boy, I'm not even certain who it was. It wasn't Bill Frist. He was the guy who took over. It was the chief of staff to one of the senators. Actually posted on the Roberts Rules Board, basically, how do we remove this guy from the how do we remove this guy from the leadership position? And what I advised, and I'm not under any kind of, this was done informally as well on my part, so I'm not under any kind of contractual thing. I just haven't talked about it at length. I still have a copy of the emails and personal messages. I'm not sharing them, but you know, at least not until after I'm dead. Basically, what I said was this: well, you cannot remove him without going through a formal disciplinary process, but you can change your rules, kind of like what we were talking about tonight, in order to make him removed by just simply rescinding his election. But you're going to have to change your rules to do it. And this is what we talked about between all of these people. Or between myself and, I shouldn't say all these people, between myself and the gentleman who was doing this. And it came up over the RONR board, Robert's Rules of Order Newly Revised. And to me, that has always shown to me, how absolutely poorly our country is run, that if you're planning to stage a coup, you have to go on the internet and ask advice on how to do it. That blew my mind, because I didn't even know I was talking to him when I started, or who I was talking about, or anything like that. It was just a bizarre situation. And that was a year after I made I turned a used car salesman into a congressman overnight. So that was fine. I had some good times in the early 2000s, but that's all of my career that's back out of there. But I have done this kind of thing before. It usually works. Sometimes it doesn't work. When it doesn't work, it is usually because you don't have a majority and the other people are playing by the rules. From what I've seen here, honestly, the other side is not playing by the rules. And if they were, I think you'd be in trouble. Or you may not be in trouble, but you wouldn't be needing my services. Any additional questions? By the way, I think I'm the most boring person in North America. So are there any other questions? Well, I don't hear any, so I guess that's going to be, oh, go ahead.
I think I had one last question. Can you think of a scenario, what kind of strategy they're going to employ where we could have the majority and we could still lose?
Yeah, I can. And that is when they decide they're going to get up and walk out of the meeting and try to hold it someplace else. That's what they could do. Where they could decide that they're going to get security to come in there and clear the room. That would be the kind of situation where they would lose, where they could do it. But I think that by using that motion to adjourn, to fix a time to which to adjourn, you can get around that. That's why I mentioned that more than I normally do when I'm doing this with a regular group. I think that that would be the kind of problem. There is a method, and it's called putting the motion from the floor, where if Whitney decides she's not going to entertain a motion and she's not going to entertain an appeal, where it can be taken away from, where it can be basically the convention can be taken away from her. And I think that there will be numerous ways that the convention will be taken away from her. But I think that that would be one of the things that would be a problem. One of the things that I would be much more worried about is going to be if they all run out to the parking lot and try to have a meeting and then claim that they are the real party. I don't think that will fly.
So what can we do to prevent that or to try to defend against that?
Be prepared to have another convention someplace else.
Oh,
Yeah, that's about the only way to do it. If this goes out there, I know you don't like to hear that, I'm sure. But if worse comes to worse, that might be what you have to do. And part of it is, at some point, it's just going to have to be, you have to ignore her. You have to ignore what they are trying to do. You're in charge. That's one of the things when you talked about rehearsal, and Ms. Is it Jenrich, I believe, asked about rehearsals. Yeah, that will be one of the things that I'm going to be trying to train you to do in rehearsals, to deal with these kind of very nasty situations. And I'm going to be about 3 or 4 times nastier than Whitney could ever possibly be. So just so you get used to it. Yes.
I don't know. She's got resting bitch face, so.
Now somebody will say, "Oh, you laughed at that joke." Okay, I've heard it, but yeah, ideally, she will stand up there, bang the gavel like a child with a rattle, scream and yell, and you will completely ignore her. And that will be probably the worst thing you can do to her. That's my own opinion on that. That's what you're going to see happen. I expect it to be not a disaster, but to look like a disaster. So this is not going to be pretty. You need to all understand that. It would be nice if everybody obeyed the rules, but I don't, from what I've seen, she is not going to be obeying the rules. I wish I had a different, that's my own assessment. I wish I had a different one. And by the way, I saw something about a plaque. Wait until this is successful, until you talk about getting me a plaque. Okay.
I did say after Reno.
Yeah, make sure that it's successful first, because things can go wrong. I am not infallible. I've done a lot of these things relatively as parliamentarians do. I've probably done maybe 4, 5 perhaps, which is not a lot, but that's 4 or 5 more than just about everybody else that in my professional area has done. You know, we know everybody thinks this is going to look really bad. It will, as far as I can tell, but we're going to do the best to do everything according to the rules. And that's going to be the one thing, because we don't want to we don't want to step on anybody's rights. We don't want to, and when I say we, I mean, I'm talking about all of us here. We don't want to do that, A, because it's wrong, and B, because if we do it, it can be thrown out later. And nobody wants that. Are there any more? Yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
During the Republican primary in 2011, there was a bunch of like Ron Paul supporters who, for whatever reason, they were trying to take over the party, but for whatever reason, they were like, okay, you can't take over the party. And they called security and they were pushing them out of the room, and somehow they wrangled them out of the room. So they just held their meeting in the parking lot and appointed their people and stuff like that. Since we're in the majority and they are in the minority, and it kind of mirrors that situation, what if we had to go? I guess we couldn't do that unless we removed the chair first. That's not really a question. It was just like, what do you think of that scenario?
If you had to go, you would use the motion to adjourn, to fix a time to which to adjourn. We would set something up in a very quick way in about 15 minutes. This is what I would suggest. I'll war game it out for you right now. If you're being forced out of the room, you move that when you adjourn at the call of a committee consisting of Name 3 people that you would want it to adjourn to. Ms. McCardle, Mr. Heiss, and Mr. Smith. I don't know, whoever else you want to put on there. Then adjourn the meeting. Make sure that there is a record of it. Hopefully, this is on C-SPAN, and that they will be able to see it. And then at that particular point, you let them establish a meeting as quickly as possible at a venue that they can get to. That would be my only suggestion in that kind of a situation, but that is how I would work it. And yes, I have been in those kind of situations, and yes, that is what I have recommended.
Thanks a bunch. I
Okay.
appreciate your expertise.
Okay.
So how
any
long?
other question?
How
Go
long
ahead.
have you been following this whole situation, JJ? And was it through Karen Ann Harlos that you heard about a lot of this stuff? Or
Yes. Well, I saw her. She started posting on the Roberts board, and I still post on the Roberts board occasionally, and get into fights with Dan Hunneman all the time. He's one of the authors. I think good naturedly, he apologized to me for something a couple of days ago, which was amazing. But I saw her post, and I frankly saw this woman with pink hair posting. And I thought, boy, she must be some sort of a woke, crazy woman. But she's interested in parliamentary procedure. She had a link to her program called R&R. And I went there and I thought, looking at this and seeing Mike Seebeck, who is sitting there in tie-dye, that this was going to be a complete parody and a complete waste of time. And well, maybe I'd watch it for humor and seeing how badly everybody does, and I could at least laugh at it or anything like that. And I watched their show, 1 or 2 episodes, and I saw how much they were concerned with it, how well they were studying for it. And I began to follow it, and I waited for it to come out weekly. And I've actually written a review of it that appeared in National Parliamentarian magazine. It was a favorable review. And I said basically, well, if you don't mind the double entendres, if you don't mind the bad language, it's a fantastic show. And I don't mind that, frankly. And I think that they do, basically the Lord's work there when they're trying to go over how parliamentary procedure works. I think they do a really good job. And I was just very much impressed. And that's how I became interested in this. And I followed her. I saw some of the drama going on with her trying to remove her, then eventually removing her. That's basically how I became involved. And as I told her, and I told her last summer, I'm planning to retire, so try not to do any, this was before she was removed. I said, try not to do anything. I'm going to be retiring at the end of the year. And I got a call from her, I think in January, and say, are you sure you're retired or something like that? And I said, yes. And I said, okay. And she said, yes. And she finally basically talked me into it. And I said, okay, that's how I'm here. I was absolutely appalled by what I was seeing. And I would not be out there doing this. I'm certainly not doing it for the money. I'm not out here. I'm not doing it because I share your ideology. I'm sorry about that. I don't have the same ideology that you do. But I'm out here because I saw really abusive action on the part of the people that are the anti-Mises people. And that really has disturbed me. Now, Aaron Thompson, you had a question?
I figured it out.
Oh,
I was like, can you repeat the name of that show again?
The Cult
and it's
of R&R.
RONR. It's Cult of RONR. I've just discovered.
Yes. And if you take a look at the description of it, she actually, she actually says that she actually goes in there and talks about, we were tired of getting our asses kicked by the high priests of Robert, which I am one now apparently, but and I saw a lot of abuse this is how she got involved in it. And I saw what was going on in the Libertarian Party with a lot of abuse. I think Ms. Jenrich might be aware that I actually did help out with the Libertarian Party of New Jersey at their last convention. Part of my motivation there was not just that they called me, but I told them, I don't want to see another Delaware situation. This stuff is terrible. I did not want to see something like that happen in another state. And if I can help guide people through things, there wasn't anybody trying to do that, fortunately. But anything that I can do to help prevent that, okay, great. That's just me. So are there any other questions?
JJ, Mitchell Johnson, delegate from Maryland. I move to end this meeting pending any further questions from the caucus.
Okay.
Seconded.
It doesn't have to be, it's just, the chair can declare it adjourned without objection. So if there is no objection, it's been a pleasure talking to you all, and I hope we can do it again. Oh, I will add one last, I will add one last point, and I just wanted to make it clear here. I am not auditioning to be the Libertarian Party's parliamentarian. I want to retire at the end of this. And maybe help out New Jersey for another year, and then that'll be it. But that's it. That's just, you've gotten my full motivation. There's no other alternative motivation in this. I just wanted to make that clear. Mr. Mosley, I do hope you will send me your email. Okay, and that's it for me. So I guess I will close everything out. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for letting me ramble on.
Thank you.
Thanks.